Number 3, carve out chunks of time to read, think, and plan. There is so much pressure to act, to do something. We all feel this invisible force, but leaders are especially prone to it. If leaders are going to be strategic, productive, and have the energy and emotional intelligence to lead during turbulent times, leaders need time to think. I consistently counsel my clients to protect their time. I worked with the CFO of a growing technology company a few years ago. I'll call her Shelley. Shelley was a pretty senior executive with about 20 years experience as a CFO in several organizations. She was a great leader, but rapid growth with a deep disruption of the pandemic, she needed to level up her leadership. She needed to play a more strategic role in advising the CEO and providing deeper insight during executive meetings. This would require Shelley to have more time to read, think, digest, and plan. And this is how Shelley approached this challenge. First, Shelley was committed. She was convinced having more time to think was essential to her success. Shelley realized she needed to delegate more to her direct reports in order to have that time. Not only by just giving them more to do, but by spending more time developing, coaching, and being accessible to people. Next, Shelley reflected on what time of day and what day of the week would be best given her energy levels and given the cadence of her calendar. She also didn't try to do too much. She experimented with different approaches and timeframes. Shelley was also prepared. Throughout the week, she jotted things down to think about, make decisions on, research she wanted to do. And then every Sunday night, she would plan how she would spend her time that week. When it was time for her to think and reflect, she got right into it. Hi, my name is Winnie Da Silva. There are 5 things I believe leaders can do to be effective during turbulent times. Number 1, understand the threats and opportunities of a situation. Don't hesitate to pivot. Number 2, be a master communicator. Number 3, carve out time to think, read, and plan. Number 4, manage stress effectively and help your people do the same. And lastly, ask for feedback. Let me give you a quick example to illustrate each of these points. Number 1, understand the threats and opportunities of the situation. Don't hesitate to pivot. Andy Stern and John Rigos are co-CEOs of Orify Brands. Orify is a hospitality group based in New York City with nearly 100 restaurants in 9 states. When the pandemic ruthlessly paralyzed the hospitality industry in early 2020, Andy and John were understandably blindsided. The severe drop in people eating out was devastating. Now, there are many ways that Andy and John pivoted their business, like cutting costs to keep everyone on the payroll and bringing food to service workers. But they also made 2 strategic and perhaps seemingly counterintuitive decisions. First, they decided to make a major financial investment in their technology systems across all their brands and all their restaurants. Installing new technology is always disruptive. So why not use the downtime from the pandemic to make this transition right now? Their future vision included a full recovery, and they were going to be prepared. The second decision they made was to snap up a beloved restaurant brand that went into bankruptcy during the pandemic. Since then, they've integrated that brand into all that Orify has to offer and successfully have turned that brand around. To get the full story, listen to this episode, Feeding People Feeds Leadership with Andy Stern and John Rigos from my podcast, Transformative Leadership Conversations. 2, be a master communicator. Ask a business leader to quickly name the top 3 responsibilities they have as a leader, and I bet being a master communicator isn't one of them. During uncertain and difficult times, leaders need to really own this role as an important part of their day-to-day job. This is absolutely no time to hand off those responsibilities to some communications person in marketing. It is critical your people and your clients hear directly from you. Most leaders make a critical mistake thinking they've communicated enough. They haven't. You haven't. You may think you have, but you most definitely haven't. You must over-communicate, almost to the point that it feels ridiculous. People need to hear what you really mean to say many times over in a variety of communication and styles. It's not just about your people hearing that information. Of course, hearing isn't enough. You want people to process, absorb, and maybe even champion information, approaches, or ideas that you've communicated to them. And also, people want to know what's expected of them. Also, be a truth teller. Don't hold back on bad news. Don't pretend like everything's fine when it isn't. In fact, don't ever promise people it's going to be fine, because honestly, you can't guarantee that. Own your role as chief communicator. Number 4, manage stress effectively and help your people do the same. We all know that stress can completely undermine our ability to function effectively, especially during these last 2 years. And yet, we don't proactively and consistently manage our response to the stress in our lives. Managing stress is an essential leadership skill, one that many leaders don't prioritize, especially when we need it most. It might be useful to offer a definition of stress, especially what we might call bad stress. Stress is when we perceive we don't have the resources necessary to take on a challenge or perform a certain task. The key word there was perceive. An example might be when a CEO is working on an important presentation for the board and she feels like there's not enough time to prepare. While there's much to say about managing stress effectively, I'll offer just 2 ideas right here. First, be aware of the stressors in your life and how they show up physically, emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally. And yes, all 3 of these show up in our stress response. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're extremely late for a client meeting. How do you respond? Your shoulders might tense up, your imposter syndrome kicks in, you can't concentrate, and you start biting your nails. Building self-awareness around your stress triggers and how stress shows up so you can address it is critical. Help your people do the same. Also, proactively build up your stress immune system. There are 2 categories of practices to influence your stress response. Number 1, physiological practices like getting enough sleep, maintaining a healthy and balanced diet, drinking plenty of water, getting lots of exercise. These are all things we know about, but we really need to do. The other category is how we think. Our perceptual practices like letting go of things we can't control, reappraising events and seeing things maybe differently, or adopting a mindfulness practice. Help your people do the same. Lastly, ask for feedback. Can you think of a time when asking for feedback is not a good idea? I can't think of one. While you might hesitate to ask for feedback from your direct reports or employees or clients during uncertain, turbulent, or difficult times, it might be one of the best times to ask. Simply asking shows people you care. Collecting feedback during difficult times, not just when times are good, tells people that you're really serious about real feedback. Feedback may uncover some challenges or problems. This gives you a chance to proactively address these issues. People probably have some really good ideas about how the company or your team could improve. Maybe a totally new product or idea or approach, or how you could be a better leader right now. You're also modeling honesty and boldness. You're showing other people what they can do with their people and asking for feedback. If you'd like some more guidance on how to ask for feedback, check out this episode, Tell Me What You Really Think with Peter Axelson, on my podcast, Transformative Leadership Conversations.